Good day everyone, I am Aljun B. Asog, and today we will talk about the Aeroperu Flight 603. The final accident report was written by the Peruvian Director General of Air Transports, or the DGAT, of the Commission of Accident Investigations, or the CAI. David Fernandez Angel was the Chief Peruvian Accident Investigator. Guido Fernandez Llanas. There were a few misgivings about the expected irreconcilable circumstance. However, the Public Transportation Security Board designated specialist Richard Rodriguez verified that Fernandez Llanas could appropriately examine the mishap. The floating wreckage was retrieved by the Peruvian Navy. The United States Navy provided tools to retrieve the Boeing 757's flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder from the underwater wreckage after Peruvian authorities requested assistance. After the aircraft had been cleaned and polished, a later investigation into the incident revealed that adhesive tape had been accidentally left over some or all of the static ports on the underside of the fuselage, which ultimately led to the crash. Eleuterio Chacalazia, an employee, had erroneously left the tape on. The static ports are essential to the operation of nearly all of the flight instruments that provide basic aerodynamic data such as airspeed, altitude, and vertical speed to the aircraft's computers, which in turn provide additional functions such as warnings when flight characteristics approach dangerous levels. These data are provided not only to the pilots but also to the computers of the aircraft. One of the most serious problems with avionics systems is the blockage of all static ports, which is one of the few common failure modes that can result in the total failure of the multiple basic flight instruments. A system of maintenance covers for the static ports was not included in the aircraft's design. These covers, which typically come in a bright color and feature flags, some of which may have a remove before flight markings on them, are frequently used in aviation to prevent unauthorized access to important parts when the aircraft is not in use. Instead, adhesive tape was required to cover the ports due to the aircraft's design and the necessary maintenance procedure. The basic flight instruments relayed inaccurate airspeed, altitude, and vertical speed data as a result of the blocked static ports. The incorrect altimeter data were also broadcast to air traffic control, which was attempting to provide the pilots with basic flight data, as the failure was not in any of the instruments but rather in a common supporting system, defeating redundancy. The pilots were provided with some data altitude that appeared to correlate correctly with instrument data or altimeter, whereas the other data provided by ATC approximate airspeed did not. This caused a great deal of confusion in the cockpit. The correlation between the altitude data provided by ATC and on the altimeter probably added to the confusion. Even though the pilots were well aware that it was possible that all of the flight instruments were providing inaccurate data, the numerous cockpit alarms generated by the computer system, which were in opposition to each other, and the instruments added to their difficulty. The transcript of the cockpit voice recorder revealed this lack of situational awareness. Another major factor was the flight's location over water at night and lack of visual references for the pilots. The official accident report came to the conclusion that the flight crew ignored the radar altimeter reading after the descending through 2,500 feet because they were distracted by the contradictory warnings. The Aeroperu Flight 603 from Miami International Airport had landed at Lima Airport on October 1, 1996. On the first leg of the flight, a Boeing 757, there were 180 passengers. The remaining passengers were transferred to another Boeing 757 after 119 of them had left the aircraft. On October 2, this aircraft took off 42 minutes after midnight, and the crew noticed right away that the basic flight instruments such as altitude and airspeed indicator rudder ratio, max speed trim, overspeed, underspeed, and flying too low were acting erratically. They also reported receiving contradictory serial emergency messages from the flight management computer. The crew requested an immediate return to the airport and declared an emergency. Although neither the pilots nor the controller were aware that the altitude information displayed on the controller's screen was sent from the aircraft's Mode C transponder, the pilots incorrectly believed that they could determine the actual aircraft altitude by asking the controller. The controller's display of altitude was also incorrect because the transponder was receiving the same incorrect altitude data as the aircraft's altimeter. The crew decided to begin the descent for the approach to the airport in the face of a lack of reliable basic flight instrument readings, constant contradictory warnings from the aircraft's flight computer, some of which were valid and some of which were not, and the belief that they were at a safe altitude. Since the flight took place at night over water, the pilots had no visual references to help them descend or show them their true altitude. Multiple stalls were experienced by the pilots as a result of their inability to precisely monitor the aircraft's airspeed or vertical speed, resulting in a rapid loss of altitude without any corresponding change on the altimeter. The aircraft's actual altitude was significantly lower than the altitude indicated by the altimeter, which was approximately 9,700 feet. It was too late when the air traffic controller ordered a Boeing 707 to take off and assist the 757 in landing. About 25 minutes after the emergency declaration, the lift wingtip of the 757 clipped the water, causing it to fall off by several feet. The pilots desperately tried to gain altitude, and after 22 seconds, they were able to get the 757 back into the air. However, the damage to the left wing caused the plane to roll over and hit the water upside down. All 70 crew members and passengers perished. The investigation team was composed of Captain Alan McLeod, Richard Rodriguez, Guido Fernandez, and Tim Van Viveren. The aircraft crashed at the Pacific Ocean near Lima, Peru. The main problem that I saw in that video is complacency. Complacency is one of the human factors in the Dirty Dozen. It can be described as a feeling of self-satisfaction accompanied by a loss of awareness of potential dangers. The aircraft mechanic is too complacent with his work as well as the supervisor. The best solution for this error is imposing a proper training, maintaining and refreshing essential skills on the ground crew, flight crew, and everyone on the field.